Well, this is the Breakdown. Kia ora, hello and welcome. We are in lockdown and we're in isolation and we are still coming to you. That's right, Sky trying to bring you some quality discussion about what everyone's doing. And we had 7 days ago a discussion about what was going on. Stephen Bates, Sir John Kerwin joining us. And Batesy, you were talking about a number of things you were hoping to get done. How are things going at home? How are you surviving the first week in isolation?
Oh, I've got to be honest, I'm speaking way too early, and I understand I'm speaking way too early, but I've actually quite enjoyed it. It's been really good having the family around. We've done a lot of bike riding just around locally and stuff like that. Some good family time. So a couple of jobs have been done, not all of them, but so far so good. But you know, we haven't started fighting yet amongst the children. I'm sure that's on its way.
I'm being classed as one of the children in my household. I'm trying to stay inside my bubble, JK. Your bubble's not so bad where you are, but have the walls started to close in? How are you dealing with it? And I mean, how are you coping as a family?
Well, I supervised Frella doing the hedges in the gardens yesterday, Goldie, which was pretty hard while I controlled the the pizza oven and what we're going to eat for the evening. And I felt, gee, this seems a bit weird, role reversal. But anyway, I did help clean up the yard in the end, which I got a few gold stars for. So I was pretty happy about that. And the pizza went really well, although I didn't end up doing the pizza because we have an Italian pizza chef staying with us, so he did it. So at the end of the day, it was a lovely Sunday for me. And
so
I haven't been in too much trouble yet.
You've brought in a chef for the 4 weeks, haven't you? That's exactly what I would expect you to do. Batesy, you were talking about mulch getting delivered last week. Has it moved?
Right, morning kids. Your job today in lockdown is to move all this mulch all the way down, well, as far as the eye can see. Enjoy.
It's moved from the mulch shop to my yard, from my yard to anywhere else. It hasn't moved. So it has moved, but not since it arrived on my yard.
Oh, okay.
I'm using, Goldie, you know what I'm using?
That?
We've got a month. There's plenty of time.
Oh, there's plenty of time. I've gone hard early.
You're throwing that one out, Batesy. We've got a month. There's plenty of time. Just relax, everyone.
I'm trying to get everything done as soon as I possibly can. I found out what an orbital sander does, and it does my deck. So I went hard for 3 days on my hands and knees, and now I'm paying for it. I've got a sore back, shoulders hurting, but I tell you what, I'm loving my deck. I'm absolutely loving it. Anyway, let's focus on some things that have happened in the rugby world, and it has been going on. Look, a lot of discussion coming around about pay cuts. Ian Foster's taken one. The players all of a sudden, Batesy, have worked out that they know there are some challenges for the game going forward, and across the board, it's happening in all sports. It looks as though teams are having, and countries and sports are having to adjust.
Well, not only sports, isn't it? And I read an article the other day in the Herald. It's across the board. There's every industry just about is going to be affected, and rugby's no different. You know, rugby relies on sponsorship and it relies on revenue coming in the door, and that revenue is going to be tough to fight for. You know, because there's not so much of it to be bandied around at the moment. So yeah, everyone's going to have to play their part, and the purse strings, unfortunately, are just going to have to come in a little bit, and that's the fact of the situation we're in.
Really uncertain times, JK, but the conversations have obviously been there. There are some words that they haven't come to any agreement yet as such. Australia are having the same conversations with their players. But here in New Zealand, it's heartening that the top players have come out and said, we understand, and we have a great understanding of exactly what situation is facing our sport right now.
Yeah, look, and I don't think that rugby should be excluded from anything else in the country or in the world at the moment, I think it's fantastic that both parties are sitting down and putting the game first, and I'm sure all businesses are trying to do that across the country and across the world. What do we need to do in the short term to try and give us a longer runway for surviving this thing? So it's nice that the parties are sitting down and saying, yeah, I mean, Bowden Barrett came out and said we're going to take a pay cut, so that's a good start. And at the end of the day, remember that rugby employs a lot of people. We're a big organisation, not only in our country but also worldwide. And I think it's good leadership from the players to say, yep, we are going to sit down and we are going to try and help make sure that the game survives. So I think it's a great initiative.
You mentioned that the fact that it's not just here in New Zealand, it's happening globally. And Sir Bill Beaumont, who is the chair of World Rugby, he actually came out and had these things to say.
We've had to postpone or cancel matches and tournament, and this is something that we deepest regret to have done so, but obviously it is on the advice of public health. What we'll be doing, we'll be working with unions, we're working with leagues, and more importantly, we'll be working with our players and with the end to say what happens at the end of this virus. Because at the moment, one of the major issues we have, we don't know when the virus is going to end. But I can assure you that World Rugby and myself as chairman, that we'll be working extremely hard, to try and get harmony between all countries and clubs and leagues, etc., so that when we come out of this, then we will be hopefully in a strong position, all pulling in the same direction.
Well, JK, you talked about this though, the fact you felt World Rugby had a point to play. How big and how large do they need to go, and how far does it have to stretch, and how much would they, I suppose, almost have to compromise where they're sitting right now to do that?
Well, our game needs money. Our game needs money. The New Zealand Rugby Union needs money. I mean, and we're probably way better off than Australia, right? Australia are under the pump. Now, there's developing nations, there's Spain, there's all sorts of different nations in different situations. But right now, I personally believe that Bill Beaumont needs to come out and say, we have a package ready to help our game survive. They've had, I don't know how much they made from the World Cup. I'd be guessing if I said 200 million, but I did say that the other day and someone said it's more. They have a surplus of money that is used to build the game, right? But right now we're in survival mode. So that money needs to be used to survive. And so I'm hoping that soon Bill's not just going to come out and say we're all going to work together and all the fluffy stuff. He's come out and say, here, boys, there's a check out there for everyone to get us through this bad time. Whether we pay it back or whatever is something we can worry about in the wash, but we need financial support right now for our game.
You say that then, Batesy, does that support go to the grassroots? Is that where it should be? First and foremost, is that where it needs to be tagged? Yes, the professional arm, but when you start talking about the situation globally, we don't know when teams are going to be able to travel overseas. So initially, should that be invested maybe at the lowest part of the game, the grassroots, which should be our strongest?
I think when you talk about the grassroots in New Zealand, when we talk about grassroots, we talk about the club scene, but I think we've also got to have genuine trust in the ability. Say, for example, if World Rugby handed New Zealand Rugby a check, we've got to have trust that New Zealand Rugby know what the best way to spend that money is. So I don't think it needs to go straight from World Rugby straight to the clubs. You've got to believe that the governing body in your country has got the game's best values at heart, and they know the best way to distribute or spend that money for the biggest bang for the game in our/their area.
What we do know is the fact World Rugby, they do have a war chest, the fact that they've been through World Cups, they do have resources. It'll be interesting to see over time how it plays out, where they're able to service the game of rugby union next. You talk about servicing the game of rugby union. Well, one of our very best is going to join us. Nick Gill joins us. I've been trying to get him on the breakdown. He's been elusive, and this is the time. This is what lockdown does here in New Zealand. Gilly, you're a multi-sporter. You're used to being on the bike, being on the road, doing all the things that athletes and strength and conditioning coaches do, mate. How are you coping with lockdown time, and how are you planning your days?
Oh, I'm loving it, mate. I'm loving it. I'm in the garage and, making sure I'm being active, and I'm running out on the road, just up and down my street, and nothing silly like some of the other characters around the country doing, run around their section 500 times. But no, I'm keeping myself busy, mate. I'm loving it.
Let's talk about the context of your job. I mean, these are challenging times for players, organisations, sports alike. For you, in the role that you're playing with your group of players, and I suppose communicating through Super Rugby franchises, I am sure. How are you going about the daily business of keeping these guys in good nick?
Yeah, it's been really busy actually. Obviously, lots and lots of Zoom meetings, and I suppose the biggest thing is, it's all about communication and making sure that we're well planned, because we don't really know when we're going to be playing rugby again. So, the hard thing is making sure we're doing everything we can to make sure the athletes are physically ready, but then also, more importantly, looking after them mentally, making sure that everyone's got some structures and some connections in place with family, but even with teammates. So there's lots of work going on behind the scenes. The super clubs are doing a great job, and there's a lot of communication going on.
What have you seen from the franchises, and what sort of setups have you seen the boys operating with, if you've got any information on that?
Yeah, it was a bit of a scramble, to be fair, because the Monday just before Level 4 was announced, we already had a number of the guys out shopping for stuff for home, because we anticipated that this was going to happen. So I know the All Black lads at least put their hand in their pocket and invested quite heavily into their home setups. So most of the All Black players have home gyms and some cardio equipment, whether that's bikes or assault bikes or treadmills. So most of the senior pros, if you like, are fully set up at home. A few people with some makeshift setups, and the clubs have, some of the Super Rugby teams at least have emptied their own gyms and delivered stuff to players. So everyone's got some gear at home, and that's keeping them busy.
When it does finish, Nick, when it does finish, like for example, the boys have done no contact training. They won't have done any training. Let's just say, and I know the lockdown's for a few more weeks, but let's just say for argument's sake, Jacinda says the lockdown finishes on Monday. When do you expect the boys to be able to be back playing due to the fact no contact training, no physical interaction, no team trainings? What sort of time frame would you put on that?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it, Batesy? Because when you're locked away in your bubble, you can't really go tackling your kids or running into some brick walls or anything like that. So that is the hardest thing to be ticking off. And so the question you've asked is a good one, because obviously the people running the game are asking the same question as what's doable. And I suppose if we put our player safety hat on, it's about how quickly can we progress the collision and the contact, and then put the players out on the field and not have their welfare at stake. And I think the absolute bare minimum is 2 weeks. Ideally it would be 3 weeks, but I know that our super clubs in January were forced with a pretty short time frame to get ready for pre-season games, because the comp started early this year. So we actually had a bit of a practice in January with the same situation, where players are on leave for a couple of weeks over Christmas, and they come in and they're playing pre-seasons in a couple of weeks. So 2 to 3 weeks is probably where we need to sit there.
Gilly, last one from me. We obviously know for many, many reasons this is not an ideal situation for anyone's state. But let's just say for your situation, is this an opportunity for a couple of guys that perhaps, to get some physical aspects done that maybe, and I'll just say maybe Rico, for example, you wanted to get him a little bit more speed work. Is it a chance to guys to do some physical work to perhaps promote their physical awareness of where they are as players?
Absolutely, and that's what's been encouraged around the country. Is like anyone in any position, whether you're a rugby player or you're running a small business, then you have to look at all the silver linings to the situation, and the opportunity to spend some time working on some areas that, hey, they might be strengths, they might be weaknesses. We've got an opportunity here to actually get some work in, physically, as well as just being around our loved ones. I mean, gee, it's almost a force. So long as we love our loved ones, it's actually a really good opportunity to spend some time with each other.
So, Gilly, you're talking about the here and the now. That's sort of pretty much clear. It's going to be a challenge. Let's take things back a little bit. And this topic of conversation, it comes up every season about the rest and rotation of players. And you've been a part of this program for a long, long time. You understand the science about how we need to look after and condition these guys, given the challenges that are in front of them. So since when you've started and to where we are now, there would have been some huge changes in the game that have maybe forced you into this position, or like you say, the science has changed. What have you noticed the most? What are the significant things that meant that players just can't continually go out week on week in such a high contact sport?
Well, I think the couple of things. So I've been with the All Blacks for This is my 13th year, I think, and just the size of the players has gone up massively. When I started, our locks were 110 kilos and our props were 112 kilos, and so every year we've put a kilo on a player. So now our locks are 120 kilos and our props are 125 kilos, 130 kilos. So the size of the athlete has gone up. I think the strength and conditioning side of things has evolved, where the athletes are very, very fit and very professional in how they prepare physically, around their nutrition, around their sleep, around all those things. So you've got these big athletes that are strong and fast and fit, and so the collision is massive. It's always been big, but now the collision is just immense. And as the level of rugby goes up, the magnitude of the collision seems to be greater. And so you've got that. So you've got the game on Saturday, which is very intense. And then you've got the fact that training load and time within the I suppose the performance environment has gone up. So the mental and physical load has probably doubled. And so with that comes the need to recover, the need to reload and get ready physically, the need to be taken away from some collision so that you can actually, I suppose, get ready for the next bout or period of time where you're going to be exposed to a lot.
Would it be fair to say that over the course of 25 years we've had a professional rugby, that the game has become, and JK is someone who's across this, particularly across double coast, that it's become more of an anaerobic game rather than an aerobic contest. The fact that we're watching old footage on television now and we just ran around for hours. We just ran and ran and ran and ran. That's what we did. You're talking about going to the gym. You're talking about contact areas that was foreign to the generation that I played into, particularly in my positions. Is that a good assumption, the fact that the game now short, sharp bursts, and is it in the best interest of the game?
I think that is what's happening. It is more explosive, and just looking at how we train and what the game looks like, even with the reserves now and the bench coming off the pine, it's sort of gone are the days where props play 80 minutes. It just doesn't happen very often. You sort of have a new front row come on after 50, and so there's definitely changes in the physical demands of the game and how we prepare for that. And so it's definitely means that there is, like the fact that we're running faster, it's more explosive, we're stronger, we're bigger. The injuries that we see are just so much more serious. We're sort of getting more broken bones than we used to. We're getting less soft tissue injuries because the athletes are probably more conditioned for the demands. But yeah, the collision and the type of injuries are changing, and how we prepare has to change. So it's definitely less aerobic. We still need to be fit to go 80 minutes because a number of players do, but we need to be fast over the 80 rather than plodding.
Look, you've been a huge part of the All Black success over a long, long period of time, mate. You're smiling now. Have you been smiling in the last week? Do you think you'll be smiling in 3 weeks' time? You talk about isolation for everybody, the challenges and the players. And how are you coping with it? And have you got goals yourself that you put in place? What would you say to the people at home who are going to get maybe a little bit of cabin fever? What are the little things that you'd suggest to them that they might do to help them get through these tough times?
Well, it's a toughie, Jeff. It's a toughie. But, I can only speak what I think is important for me and my family is, we just try and make sure we've each got an idea of what the day's going to look like, a bit of a structure, try and get outside, get some fresh air and get some activity done. I'm working most of the day at the moment on the computer, so I sort of get up early and do my exercise. And we're doing things like we're sharing the cooking, so everyone's got a different turn of cooking. We're ticking off things around the house that need to be done. So you just got to keep busy and know that also we're going sick of each other. So my wife asked me last night, how are we going to get through this, and how are you going to make sure that we don't start clashing? And I said, just as long as I've got some exercise, get some time away from each other, we'll be fine. So I think most households will have different things in place, but we just have to keep thinking about there's heaps of positives in the situation and make sure you grasp onto the positives rather than sit there worrying about all the bad stuff that's going on. Let's just make the most of it.
It's an opportunity for you, Batesy, in the kitchen. That's what he's saying.
Well, I just want to ask, I've been in the kitchen and we're doing something. I just want to ask Nick one final thing though, Nick. So you said the game's got more explosive. So are you finally ready to admit that you said when you said take me down to Lovelock track and run me for 3Ks that you were wrong?
No, back then I wasn't, Batesy, because Batesy, back in the olden days when you were playing, the game was still aerobic, mate.
Oh, okay. So you're not ready to admit it? Okay, we'll wait a few more years and see what happens.
No, you and I, Batesy, will go for a 3K run at see how well we go. Hey, look after yourself. Thanks very much. Looking forward to seeing you and your team, I suppose, as soon as possible, but stay safe and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Well, it's great to know that things are in great hands. When you talk about someone like Nick Gill, JK, his experience, what he's been through, how he's seen as he talked about how the game has changed. Look, you did it as a coach, as players transitioned. You're in Italy and then you're in Japan. You come back to New Zealand. You've seen how the development of players has changed. For you, what's significantly different as you were going through that coaching?
I think the first time that I had awareness around it was I went to rugby league for 2 years and saw a different physical specimen. And then I went and played and finished my career in Japan. Craig Dowd, when I left, I played with Craig. When I left, he was sort of just coming into his career. He weighed something like 98 kilos. 6 years later, when I got back from Japan, he was still playing, coming towards the end of his career, but he was 120 kilos, you know, and that was just from actually going, I think he was a carpenter back then, I can't remember, but, you know, training full time. And I've seen that consistently. Put it this way, if Sonny Bill Williams played in my time, he would have been in the second row, right? Or at a limit, a loose forward. There's no way he would have been a centre. The first time I met Ma Nonu, I couldn't believe how wide he was, but then he turned on his side and he was as thick as he was wide. And I thought, man, you know, that guy probably would have been a hooker in my days. And constantly growing from an athlete point of view. And, you know, do we want to continue to see that growth in our athletes, or do we want to bring it back and, you know, keep the skinny, niggly, grumpy halfback involved, or is he going to be 95 kilos as well, which is what we're seeing? So it's an interesting conversation.
How does it explain for you the fact that you didn't end up in the forwards, mate?
Well, actually, I was lucky, mate. I was bloody lucky, because I was actually the first ever big winger. So before me, there was all the smaller wingers, and John Hart had the vision to go, I'm going to change things up. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't, I don't know, because I can't tackle and I was scared of rucks. So there's no way I would have been a forward, mate, so I can tell you that.
I'll tell you, Inga Tuigamala, Batesy, Inga Tuigamala wasn't that small. I remember him vividly.
Let's talk about Terry Wright, mate, who used to win the Snells Beach sprint race. He used to come up after playing from Auckland and run the Snells Beach sprint race round away from where we had our family bat. So there's another winger. But there is still, and I know the players are getting bigger and bigger, and I understand that, but there is still a place for small people in our game.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a place for them. Look, we all know what's happening at the moment. It's a challenge for everyone. Some people are seeing it as an opportunity for change. Some people have got plenty to say. And James Haskell, former England international, he has gone for it. He has let us know without no certain doubts exactly where he thinks the game should go.
You know, my concerns with rugby in the professional game are that people involved in rugby think rugby is everything. They think everybody cares about rugby. They think everybody knows about it, and they just don't. Outside in the real world, you know, you suddenly realise, if you ever get out of that bubble, that people don't care, and that it's a third or fourth tier sport. So I think the whole game has to be, you know, centered around being accessible. You know, there's a younger generation with a short attention span. You need to be punchy, you need to be interesting. Match day experiences have to be punchy and interesting. You know, you have to be competitive in a competitive marketplace. You have to create a product that's fun to watch, easily understandable, education around it. You know, you have to do more with club rugbies and getting kids to play it at schools. I think this is an opportunity for the world in large to maybe look at the way we travel, look at the way we treat people, look at the way we set up our healthcare, look at our general hygiene, and also look at, you know, in team sport, look at how we set teams up, look at how we do the business models, and see if we can do something better this time round. When you tune in to watch an international game, you know, you want someone engaging, someone upbeat, someone informed, to create something exciting for you to watch. You don't want dreary old nonsense. And I'm sorry to say that's what my experience of watching it is the last few years has been.
Wow, strong opinions, Batesy. Loose forward, played around the world though. He wants to see some change.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'll go back to what we said earlier. In these times, the financial purse is going to tighten a little bit. So therefore, we've got to be better at sort of what we do. And we have to produce a better product because there's not going to be that many dollars out there. And in saying that too, it doesn't matter what industry we're in, be it rugby, be it soccer, be it business. We're just going to have to be a little bit better. But he certainly didn't leave any stones unturned, did he? Certainly know where he sits in his opinion.
What do you reckon, JK?
Oh yeah, I mean, I spent some time with James during the last World Cup, and he loves a yarn. I mean, he does love a yarn, and he has an opinion. And I love people with opinions. I don't necessarily agree with all his opinions. I mean, rugby has always been the fourth and fifth sport in most of these countries. I've lived in Japan, I've lived in Italy, and it's always a struggle to try and get exposure, to try and get viewership, to try and get people coming to the game. So that's nothing new for us. And one of the reasons why the World Cup was formed was to actually start competing. And what we're seeing with those World Cups is we are slowly growing our game. Now, do we trust the infrastructure of some of the countries to pick up on that? The World Cup in 2003 has seen incredible money go into the Australian game. How did they deal with that money to grow the game and make it better? Big question mark there. So I think James has got some decent points, but we've always been the little brother, and it's always been hard for us. So do we need to see changes in our games? I mean, in this show alone, we've talked about the athlete. Do we need to keep building them? Do we need to go back to some of the other styles of games? But at the end of the day, we are trying to get, share. Let's not even talk about America.
Yeah. Batesy, you've got some mulch to move. JK, you've got some cooking to do. I tell you what, you can check out though, Isolation Nation, what our players, what our fans are doing. Tuesday, Stanaway, Israel Dag, Wednesday and Sunday. Everyone stay safe, look after yourselves, and we'll catch you in 7 days' time on The Breakdown, which is in lockdown. We'll see you soon.